One. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Digital Access to Core and Independent Reading with Sora. By now, you've probably seen these overarching objectives about supporting students culturally and linguistically sustaining learning. And we hope that you will be able to use all of these overarching objectives, like sharing this with families, allowing students to discover their own strengths, and so on. So, I think we need, yes, that's okay. So hi, everybody. I'm Debbie Froggatt, Director of Library Services. We're all going to introduce ourselves.
I'm Jane Eichord. I work at the O'Brien School. I'm the school librarian there.
Hi, I'm Morgan Van Cleef, and I am the teacher librarian at the P.A. Shaw Elementary School in Dorchester.
And we hope that during this session that you will leave with knowing how to recommend and assign Sora text, and as well as know how to use some of the Sora functions and to support learning for all of your students. And we also hope that you consider what it means to have a classroom and a school that is a culture of reading. Okay.
So we just wanted to remind people at this time, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the Zoom chat and we'll try to answer them as we go along. We'll also have some time at the end to answer them if we don't get to them right away.
Yes, and if you are watching this asynchronously, I think that's the correct way to say it, feel free to email me with questions and I will make sure they get answered.
So to start off, we wanted to, since we don't have a chance to say hi to you in person and say, hey, what did you read over the summer? We wanted to see if you would just do a quick check-in with us about what you did read over the summer. So what we'd like for you to do is give a quick click on the link which says share your answers on our Padlet and let us know what you read. And then additionally, sort of considering that we're talking about an online platform here, how you accessed what you read over the summer.
I'm just going to click on it quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're joining us, you can sort of see what some people have already read and how they accessed it. Okay.
So you may be wondering, well, okay, what is Sora? Well, Sora is a platform that, and you may use Overdrive Libby for adult ebooks and audiobooks, but this is the children's version, and Overdrive is the vendor that is providing this for us. And so it allows students and faculty, again, to access audiobooks from core collections that will be available, as well as the public library. And I do just want to thank Boston Public Library, because without their support, we would not have the amount of access to a wide-ranging set of texts that you will begin to learn about as we move on.
So the digital content on Sora is compatible on all major devices, which is great for our students at home. That means they can access the Sora app on their Chromebooks. If they have a different desktop or laptop computer at home, tablets, Kindles, even on a smartphone, the app works great. And this means that they can use it either through the Chromebook provided by the district or something that they already use and are comfortable with at home. Another great thing about the app is the texts that the students see can be read online or offline. The age-appropriate access as well. The way that Sora works, it's really great because the students only see titles that would be age appropriate for them.
And I'm just going to jump in here, Morgan. I think actually this slide was assigned to me. So thank you for providing me with that transition. Title assignments, I think if you go to the next slide, actually, it sort of lists some of the features. So title assignments, sort of a fancy way of saying that you're able to put an ebook on the homepage of a student. So you can sort of give a student, maybe a new student to your classroom, a nudge and say, hey, like I really think that you'd like seeing or sort of like exploring this book. There are curated collections, so you can build sort of around a unit that you're preparing for your students. And then as Debbie mentioned, you can also sort of tie into library holdings, and I think Morgan's going to give you some instructions about exactly how you do that. And I just want to, before moving on, I just wanted to sort of draw your attention to the note at the top of the screen, which indicates that title assignments and collections are created in Marketplace. So Marketplace, of course, implies that there's money involved, and you can purchase titles individually at your school, but even though you need to access Marketplace in order to do title assignments and other features in this app, it doesn't mean that you have to purchase them. So for example, title assignments, you don't have to pay for using that feature.
And as Jane said, there are different levels, and I want you to think about the youngest learners in the bottom of this triangle. They can only see, it's set up in such a way through Clever that they can only see age appropriate resources. And then the young adult, the green section, young adults, they can see the juvenile and the young adult sections. And then those of us that are considered adults, high school, some of the high school kids, I believe, but all of us adults can see the whole collection. And believe it or not, it's starting to rain where I'm sitting. So I'm going to move in while Morgan goes over and Jane go over the brief agenda, and we'll get into the details. So excuse me for a minute. I'm just going to mute myself.
Okay, so some of the wonderful features that Sora offers is that you're able to borrow from your local public library. Actually, one of my favorite things, which I'll show you how to do later, is not only can you add books from the Boston Public Library, but you can add from surrounding public libraries as well. You are also able to assign ebooks or audiobooks to students, which will then display prominently in the Sora Home tab, which makes it easy for students to find something that you've pointed out to them or suggested. You're able to create personal reading wish lists. This is even great if you're using it just as an adult to keep track of things you might want to read later or come back to later. You can export notes and highlights that you've taken while reading a certain title. Even after the book is returned, you still have access to any notes that you have taken. A great thing I love about this, being a school librarian, is it really promotes choice reading, meaning that it gives students ownership over their own learning and their own interests. So students get to go in and really choose things that they're interested in, that they want to read, which in turn makes them read more, become more excited about reading in general. Sora also has some really great features to reach our ESL learners and our reluctant readers. They have some really great books that are high interest to get our reluctant readers excited. And it's great for teachers and students as well, because you can track personal reading stats. So Sora keeps track of what you've read, how many minutes you've read in a day, how many books you've read, and sort of your completion as you go along.
So here are a few student tools, and it really gives them control over kind of what they're looking at and what they're interested in. Getting access to ebooks and audiobooks, right? We're trying to reach a wide audience here, like however you want to access it, and whatever makes the most sense for you, and maybe what your teacher might encourage for you is available to you in this platform. Again, sort of emphasizing that public library, expanding our access and student access to collections across the city and across the state. Right, students can make lists of things that they're really interested in, they really want to read. And, our hope always as librarians is that the more they read, the more they'll sort of gain a sense of what they're interested in and sort of get excited about reading. Has sort of these academic features, I think, which kids like, but I think teachers get a little bit more excited about, like defining and saving words that maybe students don't know. It has these cool abilities to like export notes that you take or that students take as they're reading books, and lets them highlight passages that they're interested in. You can sort of customize the way the app appears before you. So, if you prefer sort of larger font, or you're trying to sort of improve your reading at night, if students are trying to maybe read when it's a little closer time to bed, you can make the back of the screen darker. So it has all kinds of really cool features like that.
Sorry. Okay. So I am going to start by showing you and sort of demoing through how you're going to access the Boston Public Schools digital collection. So there's a couple ways to do that. If you were on a phone or a mobile device, you would go to the app, which is called Sora by Overdrive. If you're on a laptop, Chromebook, you can go and type into your browser soraapp.com/library/Boston, Mass. But I'm going to show you how to do it through the Clever Backpack, which is how I show my students to do it, and I think many of them will be familiar with. There is a setup code right here. The soraapp.com setup code is Boston MA if you need it. So I'm just going to go. When students log into Clever, there is already a direct link. So they would just click on the Sora picture or app picture, and it will bring them right here. So this is my homepage, my personal homepage in Sora. You can sort of see what pops up right now. Some great books that are always available. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Students can search by popular subject. We have young adult fiction, fantasy, science fiction, graphic novels, which are very popular, is an option. Just a really nice homepage. But what I want to show you in particular is if you click on these three horizontal bars on the side, it will sort of bring up your account and your specific settings. So that's me, Miss Van Cleef. And here we are connected to Boston Public Schools. That's an automatic library that's added for our students so that they'll be able to see all of the books available to them through the BPL collection. But I've found that you can also add other libraries in the area, which I had mentioned before, to give students even more of a chance to find more books that are available. This is something that is not automatic, so you will have to show them how to do it. All they have to do is click this plus sign where it says add a library. You'll then click add a library and type in the name. For example, I live in Brockton, so my public library, the Brockton Library, is part of a network called the Old Colony Library Network. So I would just start typing in Old Colony. There it is. And it's then going to link, if I click this as my library, it will add it and it will link all of the books in the Old Colony Library Network collection. You can add that. You can add clams. You can add the Sales Library Network. I recommend adding as many as you can so that students have the biggest opportunity to see the most books. So I usually start by showing students, if you do a search for a book, for example, this has been a really popular picture book as of late, The Day You Begin by Jacqueline Woodson. So for example, that might not be currently available in the BPS or BPL collection, but since I've added some of these other library networks, for example, the Minuteman Library Network, you can see that that book is available through them, audiobook and ebook. So students can still borrow it that way. I've also added the North of Boston Library Exchange, Old Colony. So it just gives students more of an opportunity. This is also great if there's a wait on something and students don't want to wait to read something, they have a better chance. So all you have to do to show them is click the 3 horizontal lines, add libraries, and you'll have access to this presentation where we actually show you some of the available networks that students can add. They don't need to type in a library card number. There is no extra password. All of these networks are available to students. So yeah, I am at the Shaw, like I said, in Dorchester, which is a K-3 school. One of the really great things I found is that Sora has a collection that's always available for all of our students in Boston Public Schools. As you can see, we have district-wide access to over 100 titles, meaning students don't need to wait to check out one of those books. Multiple students can be reading the same book at once, which would be great for doing book clubs or anything that requires, like you normally would get a physical class set. You can do the same thing, but on Sora. There's also, multiple resources across subject areas. So we have fiction and nonfiction available. The titles that you can see on this slide are just some of the ones in the collection that any student can access at any time.
And could I just add here that we are now working with Sora to get the core texts of the expeditionary learning curriculum into a virtual book room, if you will, for students to access as well. It hasn't happened yet, but we've been in negotiations. This is a brand new world for publishers. It just a book just doesn't automatically get changed into an ebook. There's a lot of permissions that need to happen. So I just wanted to add that, and Jane in a second is going to talk about high school books and some more high school resources, but likewise, we're doing a similar thing for some of the core high school ELA classroom reads and the study sync texts as well. Yeah, and again, it's still in a very new negotiation time, but hopefully by the time the second or third week of school actually happens, those texts will be available to you all in like 3 weeks.
And I would just say, if you're worried about where to find them, it's very easy on the Sora homepage. There is a section that's very bold that says always available. You can just click on that and sort of filter through, but they're very prominent. So you don't have to search to find, well, is this always there or is it not? They do a great job of making it very clear.
Yes.
I heard another presenter, another presenter sort of liken it to Netflix, right? It sort of puts the stuff up at the top that's like the easiest to sort of latch onto. Sorry to interrupt, Debbie.
Oh no, please, and go ahead, please.
Okay. Yeah. So when we think about titles for using with older kids, as Debbie mentioned, using them for ELA and sort of enriching materials for the writing curriculum. As also Morgan mentioned, we can do book clubs with older kids too. So you don't have to worry about like more than one student accessing the same title. There's nonfiction there too, so you can think about it as a source for when research projects come up or guided inquiry projects come up. And then there's also a feature that that's great for our English language learner population. The Harry Potter book there is available now in 7 languages. So if students aren't ready to sort of reach out or sort of reach up and read in the English language and feel more comfortable in their original language, it's a great opportunity to give them some access to materials that are great for them. So if you're a librarian, you definitely have heard of Dr. Bishop. And there's often reference to windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors, and that refers to sort of students being able to look through a window and see the experience of someone else. But most importantly, I think at this point in time for our student population is to be able to look into that mirror and see themselves reflected in materials that they have access to. And just sort of going back to the title of her work, Sliding Glass Doors, refers to something that you might sort of open and actually be able to jump into and experience yourself. So I'm going to give you just a quick moment to give a quick read to that quote and sort of think about it as in relationship to the CLSP work that we're all doing in all of our schools to make sure that we meet students in the best place that we can.
So these are just some of the CLSP texts that are always available, meaning they're always going to be in the collection and you can have multiple students reading them at the same time. We have a lot of wonderful CLSP texts spanning the grade levels that are always available. A lot of these books you could use to show students their cultural identity that they can relate to feel included, to know that books are written about them, fiction and nonfiction again. So these are just some of the great titles that Sora has made available to us to use all the time.
In a minute, Morgan will talk about assigning texts and how to do that in Sora, but please for a second think about what it means to assign books to students and to think about the concept of windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors as you do assign texts. And this set of bullet points on the right, I'm not going to read them. You can kind of skim through them as I talk. Gives you some guidelines for determining what you might assign in Sora, but also when you get back into the classroom, what might be on your shelves. And there is, on the bottom left, you'll see a link to a presentation that Maureen O'Toole created and I co-presented with her at the Teacher Summer Institute this summer if you want to learn more about that. And then we really think that this is an element of Essential One for having a safe and welcoming classroom is, again, having books that look like students. And the example of Duck for Turkey Day, I think it's part of the Open Circle set of books, and it looks like it is very CLSP worthy, if you will, but there are issues with that book in thinking that the author is white, first of all, and that the teacher sort of implies that there's only one way for Thanksgiving to be celebrated. And so it's just a way it's a very nice story, but there could be better stories. It's not, and then you could also use this as a text to show kids like what is missing or what hasn't been named, and so on. So consider that with your own collections and with those that you might be assigning students.
Okay. So I will open up the Sora app again and talk about assigning books to students. Unfortunately, at this time, until the school year actually starts with students, I am unable to show you how to assign them because they're taking the data from Aspen and Clever. It goes automatically into Sora. That will pull up your class lists. From there, you'll be able to see your class lists, choose a student, and then assign a book. So unfortunately, because of the time of the year, I cannot currently show you that, but it is a wonderful feature to use in Sora when you're able to. Another feature that I found is great is that I sort of mentioned before is creating personal book lists, adding titles to book lists. We could use the same title for an example. If a student wanted to read The Day You Begin by Jacqueline Woodson, all they have to do is go down below, add to list, And they can create a new list or add it to their wish list. So I've currently just clicked it, added the day into my wish list. When you click on shelf, this would be like the student's personal bookshelf. Anything that they have under lists, it will be able to pop up. You can see the cover right there. And from there, that's a quick way for students to go back to that same book and find it later on. I'll add another one quickly just to show you. So we can look at some of the always available books. And this is another popular one with my students, the Stink series by Megan McDonald. If a student wanted to add it to the list, they can add it to their wish list or create a new list. This is another way for students to curate something. For example, like Jane mentioned, if students are doing research and they were doing a project on the civil rights movement, they can create a new list, title it the Civil Rights Movement, and add books that they think might be relevant to their research. You can do a similar thing with younger students. For example, I know my first graders do a pretty in-depth project on birds. So when we do that, we go in here, find our nonfiction books on birds, and we have a list just for them. So those are some great options of how to use Sora by adding lists. And there is a feature eventually to assign books to students as well. And that pops up. There will be a tab for them on their homepage. Currently, lucky for me, I don't have any assignments, but if students go to their homepage, this is where they'll be able to see what their teacher has assigned them to read. Okay, so I'm just gonna go back to our presentation really quick. Okay, so you can assign books to students. You can create personal reading lists, and on a student's personal reading list, you can also track personal reading stats. So at the bottom, it can tell you how much they've read, how many minutes they've read, some really great features to sort of help you along and see how students' reading growth is progressing.
I have an 11-year-old reader in my house, and I know he would really love keeping track of like how many books he'd powered through. He would be like so impressed with himself.
Seeing it at the bottom is almost like such a sense of accomplishment.
Agreed. So Morgan, I'm going to have you go back to live Sora and try to walk you through annotating and taking notes. Okay. And while Morgan is jumping there, and I'm going to try and walk Morgan through this from my house across town. So thanks, Morgan, for driving. Today at my school, we were just in PD, and again, I'm at the O'Brien School. And one of the readings we were assigned to in my grade level team was talking about close reading strategies. And so if you're sort of doing some of that with your students and want to use some texts in Sora, it would be a great way to be able to kind of do that electronically. And I'll walk you through a little bit about how that looks. Morgan has the best books for younger kids. Obviously, we'd be doing this with younger kids. Morgan, do you happen to have any titles there with a bunch of words in them, or maybe like it has? Yeah, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, I think, is okay.
Do you want to use that? I can find a.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
So I'm going to borrow it.
Okay, cool.
This is actually great to see. You can see what happens when a student clicks to borrow a book. We're on the cover page right now. It tells you how many pages are in it, and this is where students can sort of keep track of how many pages they've read. And it turns very similar to how a book would turn. Jane, do you want me to go to a page with?
Yeah, and see, I wonder how it will highlight. It's interesting. I've never sort of used this font, I guess, before. Looked at it before. It's kind of fun. It's kind of a fun. It's a learning on the fly. Yeah. So Morgan, if you want to just highlight a passage, I like this paragraph at the bottom here.
Right here.
Yeah, if you just want to highlight it. And again, if you were in it yourself, you'd see it's not necessarily intuitive. Like I saw the hand there and I kept thinking like, this is only for turning the pages and I'm not supposed to, I should be looking for a cursor, but it's really sort of that palm that you're looking for. You just got to hold it down for an extra second. And then it gives us, after we've highlighted it, and Morgan, I think if you let up, oh, if it will define, yeah, so there on this part, if you click on note, then you can write a little annotation about it. So for example, based on this paragraph, I predict that, you know, XYZ will happen in the next chapter.
Yeah.
Okay. And then students can actually access these later. And Morgan, let's just go, would you mind maybe going to a couple pages further, and we'll pop another note in, and then we'll look on, we'll kind of look at our quotations.
So I'm just going to, oh, there we go.
It's a little tricky, yeah.
Oh, I will get this.
Yeah, it's tough. This is, I mean, it's good to show folks like how it can be a little, I had trouble with this earlier.
All about the technique.
There we go.
There you go. There you go. And yeah, you could just, you know, you can just say highlight, yeah. And then just write a quick note there. Oh yeah, in a different color. So this may be related to, use this. Yeah, this is important, right? Okay, okay, great. Thanks, Morgan. Yeah. And then what we'll do is that we'll go in and we'll see where later we could go back and look at our notes and highlights. And so we'll say we'll pretend like we're finished reading with this wimpy kid and we want to move on to the next. But our teacher has given us the task of sort of going back and finding our other, our notes and highlights from the whole book. So actually, if you close it out, and then we want to go back to our bookshelf.
Okay.
So we borrowed it, right? Oh yeah. And then we go to loans. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh, no,
and then you go to options. And then you see a few bullets down as notes and highlights, and you can click there and you'll see all of your notes from there. And then it gives you this nice reminder up at the top of the screen. You can see where you can like save it to your drive, or, you know, download it in another format.
Oh, right up here.
Yeah. So that,
yeah, I think it's great too when you're actually reading. If you look down at the bottom, you can see where these colors are. Students can click on them and go right to the note too while they're reading.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's cool.
So it's a fun way to kind of, for them to scroll through while they're reading if they remembered a note.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it also has this cool define feature too. We won't have to do it in Wimpy Kid, but if you highlight it, it will give you a dictionary definition if one's available. Let's see.
Now you're going to test me to highlight it.
I know, it's not easy.
Hold on.
Yeah, it's a little kludgy.
I wonder if, I don't know why
it might be this font that makes it a little bit tricky. Yeah. It's all my fault for choosing it. See, I was trying to give you a challenge.
It's okay.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, there's an option to highlight, define, so people can, or students can look up the definition of a word.
Super easily. I used to work in at a health sciences campus, so with medical folks, and there were features like that for medical texts, which I thought was amazing, but even better for younger kids, right?
All right.
So thanks, Morgan.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. Okay.
Okay, so as we begin to think about closing, one of the things, we're going to talk a little bit about culture of reading. And if this were synchronous, then we would ask participants to put in the chat what one way will think about one thing you've learned about Sora and how you can apply it to your practice immediately. An element of this is building a culture of reading, as I said, in person and in the classroom. And as Morgan showed, you could prompt the students to keep a reading log. And one of the things that I think that is really important, and we began this thinking about what you read this summer, is to even think about children seeing you as a reader, what you read. And I think of all the different books that I've read, I can think of something for almost any content area when I'm introducing something like, I read this book and it really made me think about what we're going to do today. Or I'm reading this now and I'm so excited about it. I got this idea from Bonnie McBride, who's the librarian at Fenway High School, and you can see the bottom middle square. And she has presented at state conferences, and she's presented to some of your colleagues about building their culture of reading. And this summer during TSI, she presented building a culture of reading in remote learning. And she's more than willing to connect with folks. And you certainly could take a look at either one of those presentations. But I think it's really important as we begin to use these ebooks. Granted, we need to use them for specific learning how to read elements of a student's life, but we also really want kids to love to read and to develop a curiosity for reading. And so I think about today and how you can have Sora in these collections build on that. And then when you're back in the classroom with kids, you have both the digital and physical texts to enrich a student's life. This is something that also can be shared with families, and families can help their son or daughter borrow books, and then they can be encouraged to get their own library cards and then read books, adult books, for their own reading edification. I want to thank, we're about to say goodbye. I want to thank Morgan and Jane. I couldn't have done this without them. I'm very grateful to my library colleagues across the city or across the district. And you can see there's some more helps. There's a toolkit that's attached to this course in Cadence. And then here is our contact information. I will close with, again, if you want to put something in the chat, or just think about how you would apply Sora and what you've learned today in your practice. And then there is a bit.ly that we will leave for you to copy because it is an exit ticket. So Morgan, thank you. Jane, thank you. We'll move to the last slide. And
I would also just say to people too that obviously I know I'm here and Jane as well. Feel free to email us if you need help trying to figure out ways to use Sora, or even just if you need book suggestions, book recommendations, especially in terms of finding books that have those culturally and linguistically sustaining practices in Sora. We're more than happy to help you locate resources.
Yes, thank you, Morgan. Both Jane and Morgan really know children's and young adult literature well. So thank you for that. Bye-bye.
Happy reading.
Happy reading. Last slide, Morgan. The ticket. One more slide. Thank you. There we go. Just leave that up and then people. There we go.